Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to share in this session is just one moment, and I'm going to take you to a kitchen. And so keep that in mind. But one moment in my experience, and again, I will split experiences from the learning and the kind of clarity that you get from those experiences. But I'm going to take you to one that essentially bridges the key image to have in your mind, but bridges an idea to a success. And effectively, what does that take? The second moment, which I'll share in the second session, is really about how do you take an idea, how do you bridge an idea to actual system change, which is more collective. Both those feed into what will be the theme for our chance to talk together in person at the conference. And when I'll share with you what I really passionately believe is going to be a change in the definition of success. So we have a future definition of success that much more about still retaining individual gain, but for collective benefit, I think is the key, in trying to reconcile, economic gain with social advantage. So again, keep these thoughts in mind. But first of all, to go down the experience track. So as you can no doubt detect, Glaswegian by birth. I have lived in the southeast of England for 20 years and travelled the world, but Glaswegian is where I was brought up. Just a middle class or working class family, aspirations of going to university, so quite average. And again, in the experience side, nothing particularly notable, other than I was really interested in football. So football was my thing. And back in early times, I represented my city in Glasgow, which was a massive accolade, but actually I got signed professionally as a teenager. And I very quickly learned, if I take you from that experience again, clarity, that actually I was good, but being honest, I wasn't that good. There was many people I played with that actually were much better, but never made it, didn't get signed by the professional teams. So I quickly learned that not all talent makes it, and that's something that I'll develop in future discussions. But what I did find out is that the work ethic really mattered. I worked in my father's small business cleaning his cars, and he really taught me the last 5% of a job is really quite a lonely place, because not many people are around. They give up, they move on. But the last 5% of any job, of any task, of any project really is something that can define absolute success and super success with just perhaps an average performance. So that Glaswegian upbringing, what did I see any sparks leading to this light bulb? Not particularly, other than the talent side. I managed to get my first job on leaving university, and it was a small team dealing with, I'll give you the industry, industrial labeling, so kind of metal plates that had to go onto electrical products or even printed circuit boards or PCs, and it had to last for the life of the product, 10 years, and be identified in case somebody stuck their fingers into the electrics. And what this company was doing was actually just doing labeling, industrial labeling, and some printing machines. And I just didn't see that it could be that way. I began to have a little bit of imagination. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to the word imagination, because the two things images I want to leave you with is the power of imagination is grossly underestimated. And I'd have that as the queen bee of the hive. But for the hive to survive, you need the worker bees. And the worker bees really all, if you think about it, they are so much about the why not, why can't something be done? They really do put in the detail. But again, going back to this company that I was working with. So industrial labeling, I didn't think it should be that way. And I came up with an idea, and it was just an idea looking at computers that actually, and I'd school chemistry. I certainly didn't have sophisticated chemistry, but I did think there must be a coating that we can have that you can print on top, that you don't need to go through all this metal and protection, that actually is just more efficient and more effective. And dug into it. I don't even know where the idea came from, but I just dug into it and began to getting suppliers involved, because it was a small company. It was only 14 or 15 of us almost working in a garage or a large garage. But pursued it with material suppliers and others. And we were competing with large organizations like 3M, so billion-dollar organizations. But again, I was quite young and naive, perhaps, of just saying, well, why not? Why can't we do an equivalent? And again, another key thing to move across to the clarity side is that don't underestimate the power of existing market share or the power of vested interest. So I kept pursuing this and actually built up a relationship with one material supplier. They tried various things for me. I kept it to myself other than testing it in my kitchen. And what I found in my kitchen was the answer that actually I didn't believe, that some of the material went through, when I say my kitchen, scrubbing off, trying to see if I could make the ink come off, but it was indelible, putting it in an oven to see if it cooked and baked, would it come off? And over time, over constant iterations, actually came up with something that worked. And I will not forget, it was a little one-bedroom flat in Glasgow. My oven, which was written off, I have to say, after that, to find various other cooking implements, that this thing actually worked. And that for me was the beginning of spanning the bridge from an idea, or creating the bridge, building the bridge from an idea through to how can you actually get it to be real. And that imagination is something that we should and can and will develop with you in these discussions. But the other key thing I would get across as a learning is ideas have to breathe. They actually have to be given life, but they have to be pushed out. And it's amazing how even in this sophisticated society today that we actually kill ideas, judge them even before they're out of someone's mouths. But if you let and create a culture in an organization that allows them to just breathe a little bit and ask the why not, but then most importantly for me, as I then did in that organization, I had to go back into the bosses because I wasn't boss at that point. I eventually became the boss to lead this project and develop the company around the world, because that's really what happened. This small company, this material, then became international and allowed me to travel to the US, live in the US, set up organizations around the world and actually grow it from when it was a few $100,000 to, I think last year it was sold for $250 million, just to put it in a little bit of context. But certainly let ideas breathe. Absolutely then build the bridge, but the bridge has to be with the worker bees. It's got to be little incremental steps of how you can take something from that idea that everyone wants to kill, just a step forward. And the step forwards for me was to get some samples produced, to then go across to the USA to see, because we had to get it approved by the main suppliers, but across there and get government approvals, actually the equivalent of sort of quality and standards, and tested. And again, all failed in the first instance. But again, another thing I would bring out most positively in this definition of the future, it has to be relationship based. Because again, I benefited from working with individuals, even in that government agency in the US and also in Canada, from those that said, okay, let me help you, give you some guidance as to what works and what doesn't work, which again allowed me to go back to the UK and back to the lab, back to the supplier and say, can we try this? So on the last part, and this for me is the equation of change and the equation of bringing an idea to life, is in the letters MCR. Now, what the M stands for is the motivation to want to do something different, the motivation to find an idea or find an improvement and find something that can increment. But motivation does not last. That's the absolute key thing. Motivation in us all does not last. And that motivation dies. And as it dies, and it may come back, is the commitment to that bit of imagination, the commitment to the idea, the commitment to the better version. Because I think another little bit of psychology that's really important to install in your subconscious. So again, the conscious to subconscious mind is such a different thing, and the transition between the two is really important, how you feed it. But to transition that to say there's always a better way. And that just allows you to keep seeking. But commitment to there's always a better way, there's something. The last part of the equation is R for resilience. because the reason why you need lots of worker bees, lots of incremental steps, is because stuff goes spectacularly wrong. So my kitchen was a high. The first rejection from the quality agency was a low. And next, we had multiple things to break through before I even could persuade my boss at the time and to allow me to continue to rack up the costs to get on the plane and rack up the costs to really focus on this. But as I shared, it certainly made a lot of sense. And again, for me, that bridge, those spans, if you can have that in mind of how do you take those ideas to absolute success, you need that individual passion to drive it through. But that certainly is a constituent part of what I believe will be a future definition of success.